Brothers and sisters, it's a great pleasure to be with you this evening, and my thanks to the chaplain for the invitation. Once, when visiting an archive, I was shown a book that was printed in the year 13. Listening to the archivist explain what might at first have seemed a European book printed centuries before Gutenberg, I was reminded by the number 13 of the opening sentence of George Orwell's dystopian novel, 1984. It was a bright cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Something similar is going on in both cases. Clocks that strike 13 indicate a new ordering of the hours from our present system. The book published in the year 13 was, of course, not printed in the year 13 by our normal counting with reference to the birth of Christ, but rather with reference to events from the French Revolution. To those in power in the early days of post-revolutionary France, recent events seemed so momentous, even more momentous than the birth of Christ, as to require a new counting of the years. It would be a whole new beginning, starting from year one. And this idea of sweeping away the existing and oppressive order and starting afresh has been very influential, especially in the 20th century. Many instances come to mind, and different people might have their own different assessments. But it seems hard to avoid the conclusion that if there were some successes, there were terrible failures too. And something similar to the radical sweeping away of the corrupt old order to start afresh is present in the reading from Genesis we have just heard. Earlier we are told that the earth was corrupt in God's sight and filled with violence. And let's face it, we know from history that human beings are, alas, capable of the most appalling cruelties. We can, as it were, see why God wished to start over. Notice too that there are all sorts of subtle allusions in the text to the earlier chapters of Genesis, setting out the creation of the animals and of the human beings. The basic idea is clear. The Eden experiment was a failure. Not only expulsion from Eden of Adam and Eve, but post-Eden produced a foul and vicious humanity. Let's start again, beginning from the very best of what the earth currently has to offer, the faithful remnant, Noah and his family. There is at long last hope in a new beginning. The great symbol of hope, a little later in Genesis, the bright and beautiful rainbow, marked the establishment of a new covenant with Noah and his descendants, amongst whom, by definition of our humanity, are you and me. Yet, despite the loveliness of the rainbow episode, darker realities are not overlooked. Yes, the Lord declared that he would never again visit such a calamity as the flood upon humanity. But this is said in the explicit knowledge that human nature remains fundamentally the same as it did before the flood. For we are told in very strong language, to use the King James translation, and the Lord said in his heart, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. That's very strong stuff. Okay, most of us, I certainly would want to qualify this to tone down the rhetoric. But the main point remains. We human beings are complicated creatures, capable of harshness and cruelty and treachery, but, to be balanced, also of love and self-sacrifice, tenderness and compassion. And it is precisely because of the complexities that remain within us that the radical transformations that we human beings might seek to effect by our own efforts, through a radical starting afresh, can in their own hidden ways contain the seeds of future oppression, that we can end back at square one and perhaps even worse than before. Many revolutions have, alas, been like that. The point is not that revolutionary actions can never be justified. It's rather that we need to act with our eyes open about the deep dynamics within us complicated members of Homo sapiens. It's not surprising that much of the Christian tradition has been wary of revolution, even if it allows it under strict conditions. As prophetic a leader of a people much oppressed, Martin Luther King understood well this point. In his celebrated letter from Birmingham prison, he explicitly invokes the classical tradition of civil disobedience instead of revolution, including its canonical spokesperson, one might say, St. Thomas Aquinas. And this is what King says. To put it in the terms of St. Thomas Aquinas, an unjust law is a human law that is not rooted in eternal and natural law. Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust, unquote. Well put. For Aquinas, an unjust law, by virtue of being unjust, is not really a law at all. It does not really have true binding power upon us. One can be justified in disobeying it. But in so doing, one needs to take care not to undermine the bigger system, if that bigger system has sufficient merit to recommend it. But if the system of laws is corrupt to the core, then of course the story is different. Rightly or wrongly, one senses in Aquinas and many others a powerful awareness of what societal instability through revolution, through a radical starting afresh, might unwittingly unleash. Of course, one could argue with this. There is a good debate to be had about two sides to that story. But surely one point remains unassailable. Be careful of easy, quick answers. They can have their place, but just be careful. The same is true at the level of individual human beings. In the sayings of the Desert Fathers and Mothers, writings mainly from the 3rd century, there is the following saying of anonymous authorship, and I quote, "If a trial comes upon you in the place where you live, do not leave that place when the trial comes. Wherever you go, you will find that what you are running from is there ahead of you," unquote. The counsel contained in the saying does not deny that the person might well be correct to start again in a different place, nor is it trying to undermine hope when it says that the trials we run away from will be waiting there for us, as though they can never be overcome. The point, rather, is to be careful about quick and facile answers that avoid the effort and work of actually sorting things out in ways that have sound foundations. Sisters and brothers, it is only because of the readings for this evening that I have spoken of human frailty and complexity. I do not wish to exaggerate the problems, because human nature also contains an immensity of goodness too. Mind you, to mention the negatives about humanity does help create a space to acknowledge the victim, and that is surely a good thing. Yet for all its explicit mentions of human weakness, the passages from Genesis about Noah and the flood are fundamentally meant to encourage us and to give us hope, even if the image of the flood is, let's face it, much too close for comfort to the gravely serious challenges currently facing our planet today. You see, underlying God swearing never to visit such a calamity upon us again is a deep hope. For the God who does so knows full well what we can sometimes be like, and yet even so, he still makes his promise. There is also the glorious rainbow, symbol of hope, and more subtly, there is the ark on the waters of the flood. Indeed, it is the same word in Hebrew for ark that is used later in Exodus for the baskets that kept the baby Moses safe, floating on the stream. A person, Moses, who would help lead his people to freedom, to a new beginning for sure, though, alas again, certainly and predictably not one that would see the end of sorrow and the inevitable complexities of history. Real hope is not naive optimism. It involves a frank acknowledgement of the weaknesses about us and in us. And yet it says that we can make things better. Not perfect, okay, but better. Throw in the grace of God, and we can do greater things still. We might have to work on ourselves. We might have to work on our world. We might have to be patient and not give way to easy answers and quick fixes. But true hope can be deepened and purified by such honest acknowledgement. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, let us hope. Let us truly hope. And let us commit ourselves to the honest, hard and patient graft for the betterment of ourselves and of our world. Amen.
Amen.